The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the low hum of voices, a mix of languages and tonalities representing dozens of advanced civilizations. At the heart of the room, holographic projections of contested star systems flickered, displaying the latest territorial incursions by the Zygarde Empire. The Zygarde were ruthless and efficient, known for their relentless expansion and unyielding dominance. It was clear to everyone in the room, war was coming, whether they wanted it or not. As the discussion intensified, a senior counselor from the Narik species raised his voice. His elongated form leaned forward, bioluminescent patterns flickering in agitation. He reminded the assembly that most species present had long evolved beyond the primitive concept of war, favoring diplomacy, compromise, and mutual survival. It was a hallmark of the Council's success. Peace had been maintained for centuries. The arrival of humanity, a relatively young species, was considered a gamble, idealistic and eager to join the galactic fold, yet untested in the grander schemes of power. Many had assumed humanity's reputation as a peaceful, cooperative species would align well with the Council's ideals. The representative from Earth sat quietly, listening to the debates. Dressed in a crisp diplomatic uniform, their demeanor exuded professionalism, but a keen observer might notice the flicker of restrained intensity in their eyes. When their turn came to speak, they rose and addressed the assembly with calm confidence. Earth, they explained, had no interest in conflict. Humanity valued collaboration, trade, and shared progress above all else. However, they added, humanity was no stranger to adversity. The Zygarde delegation sneered openly, their sharp-toothed grins visible even through the distortion of the hologram. They dismissed humanity's words as posturing, declaring their intent to annex the human-controlled systems near Zygarde borders. Resistance, they claimed, would be futile. The Zygarde emissary emphasized that humanity's lack of galactic experience rendered them irrelevant in matters of power. The room fell silent as the Earth representative paused, measuring their words. They proposed a diplomatic solution, a neutral arbitration overseen by the Council to address the Zygarde's grievances. The offer was met with murmurs of approval from other delegations. Humanity's suggestion aligned perfectly with the Council's ethos, reinforcing the image of humans as the galaxy's peacekeepers. After the session, the Earth delegate retreated to a private chamber, their composed exterior finally giving way to a heavy sigh. A secure communication line activated, and the holographic image of a Marine commander appeared. The stark contrast between the diplomat and the soldier was striking, the former clad in formality, the latter in practical military attire designed for interstellar warfare. The diplomat's voice lowered as they relayed the outcome of the session. As expected, the Zygarde had refused to negotiate. The next move, it seemed, was inevitable. The commander nodded, their expression unflinching. Humanity had anticipated this outcome months ago. The Council's members, despite their technological advancements, had grown complacent in their belief that war was an artifact of the past. But Earth knew better. From the earliest days of humanity's existence, survival had been tied to conflict, adaptation, and resilience. The Zygarde had underestimated the depths of human preparation. Elsewhere, far from the prying eyes of the Council, a fleet of human warships prepared to deploy. These vessels were unlike anything the Council had seen, sleek, heavily armored, and bristling with weaponry engineered for precision and adaptability. On board, squads of U.S. Marines underwent final briefings, their faces a mixture of focus and determination. These soldiers were humanity's insurance policy, trained not only to fight but to win against the galaxy's most formidable opponents. The training these Marines had undergone was unparalleled. Simulated zero-gravity combat, advanced alien technology integration, and psychological conditioning ensured they were ready for any scenario. Humanity's ingenuity had extended to the battlefield, with drones, AI support, and experimental weaponry complementing the raw skill of the soldiers. To the untrained eye, they might appear as simple warriors, but in truth, they were the embodiment of millennia of human warfare condensed into a single force. The commander addressed the troops, their voice steady and authoritative. They reminded the Marines of the stakes. This wasn't just about defending Earth or its colonies. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity could stand among the stars not as a vulnerable newcomer but as an equal. The Marines understood the gravity of their mission. Failure wasn't an option. As the fleet slipped into the darkness of space, cloaked from detection by cutting-edge technology, the Marines prepared for the fight ahead. They knew the Zygarde viewed them as weak, soft, and unprepared. But they also knew something the Zygarde didn't: humanity had never feared war. They had been forged in its fires for millennia. The Zygarde would soon learn that there was no force in the galaxy more determined, more innovative, or more relentless than a human fighting to protect their home. The Zygarde fleet materialized from hyperspace above the human colony of Arcadia Prime, their arrival marked by a sudden and ominous distortion in the atmosphere. The fleet, a sprawling armada of massive warships bristling with weapons, cast long shadows over the surface of the planet. From the Zygarde command vessel, an amplified message boomed across all communication channels, declaring their intent. Surrender was the only acceptable option. Resistance would lead to annihilation. The Galactic Council observed the situation through their relay systems, most members resigned to the belief that Arcadia Prime would be lost. A few even muttered that humanity had been foolish to think they could defend such a critical outpost with their limited resources. The Zygarde had chosen this target deliberately, not only to test humanity's mettle but also to send a message to the rest of the galaxy: no one could stand against their might. On the surface of Arcadia Prime, the settlers braced for the worst. The colonists, civilians with limited training and basic armaments, huddled in makeshift bunkers. But unbeknownst to the Zygarde, the human response was already in motion. High above the planet, in the shadow of Arcadia's moon, the hidden human fleet prepared to engage. The U.S. Marines led the charge, deploying in coordinated precision strikes. Their ships were smaller and more agile than the Zygarde's, designed not for overwhelming firepower but for calculated, surgical attacks. The first wave hit with devastating efficiency. Using advanced cloaking systems, the Marines bypassed the Zygarde's outer defenses, targeting key components of their massive warships: power relays, shield generators, and communication arrays. Explosions erupted across the Zygarde formation, sowing chaos in their ranks. The Zygarde, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond. Their ships, though powerful, were designed for frontal assaults, not the kind of asymmetric warfare humanity had perfected. Human fighters darted through their lines like hornets, exploiting every weakness with pinpoint accuracy. For every human ship lost, 3 Zygarde vessels were crippled or destroyed. The Marines themselves, having deployed from their ships and drop pods, landed on Zygarde vessels to carry out boarding operations. These small squads, armed with cutting-edge weaponry and powered armor, wreaked havoc within the enemy ships. The Zygarde had never faced such a relentless and adaptable enemy. Their standard tactics, overwhelming force and rigid formation, proved useless against the humans' guerrilla-style warfare. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the spectacle unfolded in real time. Holograms displayed the battle as it happened, the stark contrast between the Zygarde's brute force and the humans' calculated precision becoming increasingly apparent. Council members who had previously dismissed humanity as inexperienced found themselves glued to the unfolding drama. The Narik counselor leaned forward, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in stunned disbelief. They're not fighting like amateurs," they whispered. "They're fighting like they've done this 1,000 times before." The Zygarde commander, furious at the unexpected resistance, ordered a full-scale counterattack. Their ships reoriented to focus fire on the human fleet, sacrificing their defensive positions to crush what they perceived as an annoyance. It was a fatal mistake. The Marines, anticipating the maneuver, had set a trap. A decoy fleet of unmanned drones mimicked human ships, drawing the Zygarde into a concentrated field of electromagnetic pulses. As the EMPs detonated, Zygarde systems went offline, leaving their ships dead in the water. The Marines exploited the chaos with ruthless efficiency. Boarding teams infiltrated the Zygarde flagship, their objective clear: disable the command center and capture or eliminate the enemy leadership. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of harsh angles and dimly lit corridors, but the Marines moved with the precision of seasoned predators. Their powered armor absorbed incoming fire, while their advanced targeting systems ensured every shot counted. In a brutal firefight that lasted mere minutes, the Zygarde command center was taken. The Zygarde commander, defiant to the end, bellowed threats of vengeance even as they were subdued. The Marines, unshaken, relayed their success back to their fleet. With the flagship neutralized, the remaining Zygarde ships began to retreat, their formations collapsing into disarray. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. Some council members expressed outrage at humanity's audacity, while others praised their tactical brilliance. The Narik councillor, who had been among the most skeptical, spoke above the din. "This changes everything," they said. "Humanity is not what we thought they were. They are far more dangerous." As the Zygarde fleet limped away from Arcadia Prime, the human fleet held its position, refusing to pursue. Humanity's message was clear: they were not aggressors, but neither would they be victims. In the aftermath of the battle, the Marines regrouped, tending to their wounded and honoring their fallen. Despite their victory, there was no celebration, only the grim understanding that this was likely the beginning, not the end. The Zygarde had underestimated humanity, and they had paid the price. But the question remained: how would the rest of the galaxy respond to this revelation? For the first time, the Galactic Council faced the reality that their newest member was not the naive, peace-loving species they had assumed. Humanity was something else entirely. They were warriors, tempered by centuries of conflict, and they had just demonstrated that in the face of overwhelming odds, they would not only endure, they would prevail. The battle over Arcadia Prime had ended, but the scars it left behind were unmistakable. As the smoke cleared and the last remnants of the Zygarde fleet retreated into hyperspace, the true weight of the confrontation settled over the human forces. For the Marines on the ground and in orbit, there was no triumphant celebration, no cheers of victory. Instead, there was the quiet ritual of counting their losses, patching wounds, and preparing for the next inevitable fight. On the surface of the colony, makeshift medical stations hummed with activity. Injured Marines lay on cots, their armor scorched and battered, while medics worked tirelessly to stabilize the wounded. Some injuries were physical, plasma burns, fractured limbs, but others were harder to see. The haunted expressions on the faces of many Marines told a story of sleepless nights and the psychological toll of combat. For the civilians, the sight was equal parts inspiring and horrifying. These soldiers, who had fought so fiercely to protect them, now bore the cost of their bravery. In one corner of the field hospital, a young Marine sat staring at a photograph tucked into the inner lining of her armor. It was a picture of her family back on Earth, their smiles a stark contrast to the grim reality she now faced. A fellow soldier approached, sitting beside her without a word. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, sharing the unspoken bond of those who had seen too much. They didn't need words. The weight of loss was universal. The Galactic Council received a full report on the battle, complete with casualty numbers and logistical summaries. For the Council members, the sheer scale of destruction was almost incomprehensible. Species that had not experienced war in millennia recoiled at the brutality of the engagement. To them, the deaths of thousands, even if victorious, seemed barbaric. The idea that such losses could be considered acceptable was foreign to their way of thinking. Yet for the humans, this was a harsh but necessary reality. A heated debate broke out among the council delegates. Some argued that humanity's actions, while effective, revealed a disturbing willingness to embrace violence. Others countered that the Zygarde would not have been stopped by diplomacy alone. One alien leader, a pacifist from the Korean collective, addressed the human representative directly. Their voice, soft and measured, carried a sharp edge. "Is this what your species calls progress? Destroying lives, leaving fields of the dead in your wake? Are you truly so accustomed to war that you see this as a victory?" The human delegate, weary but composed, took a long pause before responding. "War is not progress," they said. "It's a failure to find another way. But when failure becomes unavoidable, when peace cannot be achieved through words, we fight not because we enjoy it, but because we refuse to surrender what matters most. Freedom. Lives. A future. Yes, we've seen war before. And that's precisely why we hate it so much. In another part of the galaxy, aboard a human command ship, the Marine officers convened to debrief. The room was tense, the air thick with the unspoken acknowledgement of those they had lost. A senior officer addressed the gathered soldiers, their tone sharp but not unkind. They reviewed the battle tactics, highlighting what had worked and what hadn't. Each point was dissected with precision, ensuring that future engagements would benefit from their hard-earned lessons. But beneath the analysis was a deeper undercurrent, the burden of command. Every decision carried the weight of lives, and for the officers, those lives were not just numbers, they were friends, comrades, and in many cases, family. After the debriefing, a Marine commander spoke to the gathered troops, addressing the unspoken doubts that lingered in the room. "What we do out there," they began, their voice steady but full of emotion. "It's not for glory. It's not for medals or recognition. It's for the people who can't fight for themselves. Every colony we defend, every inch of ground we hold, it's for them. It's so that they don't have to know what this feels like." The commander paused, scanning the room, meeting the eyes of those present. "I know you're tired. I know you're angry. And I know you're grieving. So am I. But understand this, what we do matters. Every battle, every sacrifice, it matters. Not just to us, but to the entire galaxy. The Zygon thought they could break us. They thought they could intimidate us into submission. But they were wrong. Because when humanity fights, we fight to protect, not to conquer. And that makes us stronger than they'll ever understand." The words resonated deeply, not just with the Marines but with the civilians and Council observers who heard them through relayed transmissions. For the first time, the Council began to understand the depth of humanity's resilience. War, for most species, was a theoretical construct, a relic of a distant past. For humans, it was an all too familiar reality, but one they had learned to endure and, when necessary, wield with precision. As the day turned to night on Arcadia Prime, the Marines continued their work, repairing damaged infrastructure, assisting the colonists, and preparing for whatever came next. For the civilians, the Marines were heroes, but to themselves, they were simply doing their duty. In quiet moments, they mourned their losses and remembered those who had fallen. But they also understood that mourning couldn't last forever. The Zygon were still out there, and the galaxy was still watching. Humanity's capacity for war had been revealed, but so too had their humanity, the compassion that drove them to protect others, the determination that pushed them to keep fighting even when the odds were stacked against them. For the Galactic Council, this duality was as fascinating as it was unsettling. They had seen humanity's strength, but they had also seen their scars. And for the first time, the Council began to ask themselves a question they had never considered before. If peace could not always be achieved through negotiation, was it possible that only a species so deeply acquainted with war could truly understand how to preserve it? The Zygon's retreat from Arcadia Prime was temporary. Within weeks, reports flooded in from the outer systems. Zygon forces were regrouping, amassing an even larger fleet. Their target was clear: the Galactic Council's core world, Sanctaris, the heart of interstellar diplomacy. A successful assault would cripple the Council's governance and spread chaos across the galaxy. For the Council, the stakes were existential. Humanity, still reeling from the costs of the Arcadia Prime engagement, did not flinch. The Zygon had underestimated them once, and now humanity was determined to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The Marines were already preparing, refining tactics, upgrading weaponry, and rallying allies. This time, it would not just be humanity against the Zygon. It would be a coalition, forged in the crucible of necessity, with humanity leading the charge. The Council's member species were reluctant at first. For centuries, they had relied on diplomacy, preferring to avoid conflict at all costs. The idea of war terrified them. Yet, after Arcadia Prime, they began to see humanity in a new light. They saw not just the violence of their actions, but the purpose behind them. The humans weren't warmongers, they were protectors. and their willingness to fight was rooted in their desire to preserve peace, not to destroy it. A tense assembly convened on Sanctaris to discuss strategy. The human representatives stood before the council, addressing the room with a blend of conviction and urgency. "The Zygarn will not stop unless we make them stop," they began. "They see peace as weakness, negotiation as surrender. But we've shown them they're wrong. And now, with your help, we can ensure they never threaten another world again." There was silence, followed by murmurs of uncertainty. A frail, elder counselor from the Anduriai species spoke, their voice trembling. "We are not warriors. We don't know how to fight as you do. How can we stand against an enemy like the Zygarn?" The human representative nodded, their expression softening. "You don't have to fight alone. That's why we're here. Humanity has fought countless wars, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We've learned how to adapt, how to endure, and how to win. Let us show you how to defend yourselves. Together, we can defeat them." Slowly, allies began to emerge. The Narik, inspired by humanity's resilience, committed their advanced energy shields to the effort. The Kree, known for their technological ingenuity, developed a fleet of support drones to enhance coalition ships. Other species contributed in their own ways, pooling resources and knowledge. What had begun as a desperate plea for unity became a coordinated interstellar defense force, the first of its kind. As the coalition assembled near Sanctaris, the Zygarn fleet advanced. Their numbers dwarfed those of the defenders, their warships massive and menacing. The Zygarn commander, arrogant and confident, broadcast a single message to the defenders. "Submit now, and your annihilation will be swift. Resist, and your suffering will be eternal." The response came not from the council, but from the Marine commander. Standing aboard the flagship Resolute Dawn, they transmitted a reply that would become legendary. "We're not afraid of you. We've faced worse and survived. You think you can break us? You'll find only unyielding steel. Come and try." The battle began in the void above Sanctaris, a maelstrom of light and energy. The Zygarn surged forward, expecting to overwhelm the defenders with brute force. But humanity and their allies had planned meticulously, turning their smaller numbers into an advantage. Using the planet's gravity well and carefully orchestrated maneuvers, they drew the Zygarn into traps, forcing them to fight on the coalition's terms. Human warships spearheaded the assault, their precision strikes disrupting the Zygarn's formations. Coalition forces, supported by the Kree drones, capitalized on the chaos, targeting vulnerable Zygarn ships with relentless efficiency. The Narik energy shields protected the fleet from the Zygarn's devastating initial volleys, buying precious time for counterattacks. On the surface of Sanctaris, the fight was just as fierce. The Zygarn deployed ground troops in a desperate bid to seize the council chambers. Marines, alongside hastily trained Allied soldiers, fought tooth and nail to hold the line. The battlefield was a cacophony of blaster fire, explosions, and shouted commands, but amidst the chaos, the coalition stood firm. The Marines led by example, their courage and determination inspiring their alien comrades to push beyond their limits. The turning point came when a daring squad of Marines infiltrated the Zygarn flagship. Their mission: disable the fleet's command center and force a retreat. The squad fought through heavily fortified corridors, their every move calculated and precise. Despite overwhelming odds, they reached the command center and planted an experimental EMP device, designed to disrupt the Zygarn's entire fleet. With seconds to spare, the Marines exfiltrated, leaving the device to detonate. The resulting blast sent shockwaves through the Zygarn fleet, disabling their systems and leaving them vulnerable. The coalition seized the opportunity, launching a final, coordinated assault that shattered the Zygarn forces. Realizing their defeat, the Zygarn fled, their remaining ships limping into the void. As the smoke cleared, the Galactic Council stood united in a way they never had before. The humans, bloodied but unbowed, had proven that strength could be wielded not for domination but for protection. The Council officially declared the Zygarn threat neutralized, and humanity was recognized as a pivotal force in securing galactic peace. In the aftermath, a Marine stood before the Council, addressing the gathered representatives. Their voice carried the weight of the fallen and the hope of the living. We don't fight because we want to. We fight because we have to. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you make. And sometimes, making peace means standing against those who would destroy it. The council chamber erupted in applause, a rare display of unity and gratitude. Humanity had not just proven their strength, they had shown the galaxy the value of fighting for what truly mattered. The Zygarde had learned a harsh lesson. Humans feared war not because they were weak, but because they understood its cost better than anyone. And in understanding that cost, they had become the galaxy's greatest protectors.